Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. It is October now, it is spooky season, and I love a good bit of spooky dooky, Halloween, dark, goth, alternative vibes. If you've been here for a minute, you'll know that I dress almost exclusively in black. I have some color in there and I try and throw it in for videos, but I pretty much only wear black. That's the main color in my wardrobe. But not only do I like black clothes, I also love black plants, and I wanted to show y'all all of the black plants that I have in my collection today and talk about why I love them so much, because they're really fun. But before we get into it, I want to say if you're new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanty content all over the internet. So if you want to follow along with my houseplanty journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos, and subscribe to my channel. If you are not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you rejoining. Let's get into these dark goth black spooky dooky plants. First up, I think the first one that I want to talk about is this guy here. So this here is my Pellionia pulchra, and I've had it for several years at this point. I grew it out from a couple tiny cuttings, and I've also taken a bajillion cuttings from it. This is one that I really like to share the love on and share as much as possible, because it's not that common of a plant. I've only recently started seeing them be sold in places like grow tropicals, but I think it's because they're typically a terrarium plant. Pellionias in general like to stay a bit more humid, but I've been able to grow this one not in terrarium settings, just in my IKEA cabinet, and that's been fine. In my IKEA cabinet, I would not count that as terrarium settings. A lot of the plants in there aren't getting that much extra humidity. I think it's maybe 60 or 70, maybe 80% humidity most of the time. So it's still quite high, but I wouldn't call it proper 100% terrarium humidity. And this one is still just growing super duper well. I have no worries about this one. And it's actually, surprisingly, the leaves have grown quite big for me. You can see at the bottom they are a little bit smaller, and they have more recently grown a little bit bigger, which is exciting. Oh my goodness. I don't think I've properly looked at this plant in quite a while, because it kind of just sits at the back of my cabinet, because I don't have to worry about it at all. I don't feel like I excessively water or anything. It doesn't have that big of needs compared to what I would think a terrarium plant might. So I just think it's a really, really cool one. It props super easily, it grows very, very well, and I really like it as a fun trailer in the back of my cabinet. This next one, I'm actually gonna want your guys' help to ID it, because I'm not 100% on the ID. It was given to me in a trade. I have been told it might be a black mamba begonia, but a lot of the black mambas I've seen online have a bit more of a spirally growth pattern, and this sort of begonia doesn't have that. But I've also seen pictures of black mambas that look quite a lot like this, so I think it might be potentially a name that gets sold for both types of plants. But this begonia, it's actually quite new to my collection. I haven't had it for all that long. I got it, I think, this summer, and I have just been growing it in a peanut butter jar for one, but in sphagnum moss, and it seemed to be absolutely fine with that. I like that the jar has a slightly more closed neck, because that keeps the humidity in a little bit better. And if you know anything about Rex begonias, you'll know that they really, really like quite high humid conditions. And so I was a bit worried when I got this one originally, but it's just been chilling. It literally lives right where you saw it, over there on my shelf, and has been perfectly happy. It's actually been growing some new leaves. This little guy is the newest leaf in there, and it has come out a little bit more red. I mean, also the backs of the leaves, bright red. If that's not a nice, good, blood red goth houseplant, I don't know what is. I feel like begonias are generally known for kind of having that sort of colored foliage, sort of black, and then with red backs. I think I've got a couple more in this that have that sort of coloration, and I really love it. I think it is such a cool one. I'm really glad that I have been able to grow it well and keep its blackness and not kill it all the way, because I feel like that was my main concern with this one when I was getting it. I thought it was just going to melt basically straight away for me, but it hasn't melted, and it has been growing phenomenally actually for the entire time I've had it. This next one is actually a little bit of a surprise to me. When I was going around my collection looking for all of my black plants, I saw this one and I was like, whoa, I didn't quite realize how black it was. But this is a haworthia. I think it's a haworthia big band. I'm not sure. I was given it, or it was labeled as a sort of mixed succulent as they tend to be labeled. But this one's just been sitting in my cactus cabinet, and I think the light in there is quite high for it, and it has caused it to go fully black. And this isn't rotten black. I was a bit worried at first that it was rotten black, but it is not. It feels solid and juicy like a sort of normal haworthia should feel, and the bits that dry out a little bit, they tend to go a bit lighter as opposed to darker. And so I've just got this kind of cool spotty, almost, it's giving me the snake from Beetlejuice vibes. I haven't seen the new one yet. I really want to see Beetlejuice, but I've not seen it yet, but it's giving me the snake from that sort of vibes in this sort of coloration. I think it looks really cool. Again, this is one that I don't really pay attention to. It's in my cactus cabinet. I have it in semi-hydro, which is what I keep all of my cacti and succulents in, but I don't keep it in a reservoir usually. I've just got this because I have just watered it and I didn't want it to drip all over me while I filmed this video. But normally it's just out like this, not in a reservoir like you would do with like typical semi-hydro. It's just in that sort of non-organic rocky substrate. That's basically what I mean by it is in semi-hydro. So yeah, it's a really cool, really weird one. I didn't quite realize how dark it had gotten. And I think it is sun stress because you can look at pictures online of them and they tend to be a little bit more green, a fairly dark green, but I've somehow turned mine black and I am definitely not mad at it. Shall we go for something a little bit more quintessential? Like very obvious. If this plant wasn't included in this video, I would be doing my job wrong. We have the ZZ Raven. And my plant is a little bit big and a little bit sprawly, and it's actually growing a bit of new growth in there, which is super exciting. The new growth comes in a sort of like bright neon-y green, and then slowly the sort of black infects it like a sort of I was gonna say disease, but like I feel like it just kind of like seeps in there and gets the plant really nice dark black glossy leaves. I mean, so this is actually one of the plants I've had for the longest in my collection. I think I've had it for 5 years now, and it might not be the healthiest ZZ Raven in the world, but I literally ignore this one. I've definitely had to repot it in the past from tuber rot because they've got like tubers inside there, and those had gotten too watered because ZZ Ravens don't like all that much water. They have these really nice thick stems which hold a lot of water, and so they don't need to be watered all that often. Obviously you need to give it water sometimes, otherwise it's not going to live, but I feel like for the most part ZZ Ravens like it very dry, and these can also tolerate very low light. I say tolerate, they're not going to grow their best in it. I think they'd prefer slightly higher, maybe more on like the medium side of the light scale if you want it to like really grow and thrive. But mine is just set back in a dark corner, no grow lights or anything, and like you saw, it's still pushing out new growth. So I must be doing, like it must be at least somewhat happy in that situation, and I'm not mad at it. I mean, maybe it is growing a little bit leggy. I feel like these aren't nodes, so like the interleaf spacing here in there might be a little bit leggy. But I don't mind. I really like the way mine looks, and it is quite a lovely big statement goth dark plant in my home. And this video, like, it literally wouldn't be a black plant video without this one. It is quintessential to the sort of black plant vibes. And I mean, I literally got that one because it was black back in the day in like 2019 or something silly. Ooh, let's go to this side and we can talk about an alocasia. So I have this beautiful alocasia ninja here, and this one is very, very similar to the alocasia black velvet, which I do have as well. I should have probably pulled it. I'll put a clip in here of my black velvet. It's not doing the best at the minute. I'm working on it, but my alocasia ninja here is doing phenomenally and growing really, really well. And this one's also got the big, beautiful, velvety, dark black green leaves. I mean, they've got a nice contrast vein in there, which really makes the darkness even darker. But I've not found that this is a particularly difficult alocasia. I know alocasias in general aren't necessarily the easiest plants, but since I've been growing all of my alocasias in semi-hydro with a reservoir, you can see I've got a little indicator there that shows the water level in this pot. But since I've been growing this in semi-hydro with a reservoir, it has been doing phenomenally. It put out this like insane, really, really big leaf. I don't exactly know why it decided it wanted to put out a huge leaf in my presence and then kind of go back to smaller leaves, but it did. And then also this leaf is actually grown in really, really weird. It's not like it's been damaged, it's like the actual edge of the leaf. It's super duper strange, and I'm not totally sure what happened there. It's just a bit of a mutant leaf, and I mean, I guess it just adds to the charm of the plant. But this one is also living in my IKEA cabinet, and it really likes it in there. I said earlier about the humidity levels, they tend to be quite high, and as long as I keep it in semi-hydro and I don't leave the water reservoir to like go completely down, it is absolutely fine and loves life. But yeah, it's just a really cool, beautiful, dark one. And the leaves are really, really round in this case as well. This leaf is so like pancakey round. I like it. This next one, I literally had to take cuttings of this one because the begonia Arabia sunset I have is attached to sort of chain trellis in the office. It has just grown crazily since I put it there, and so I had to take cuttings because it's literally attached to the wall at this point in my home. But this begonia is probably what I would consider the most goth begonia that I have ever seen. Its leaves are almost pitch black in there, but they've also got these like sort of little hair spikes on them. And then the backs of the leaves are pure full blood red, which, I mean, it is just such a fun one. And also, this is a cane begonia, which is easier, in my opinion, to grow than the sort of Rex begonia that I showed you earlier. It doesn't need quite as much humidity in my experience, though I do find that they also grow really well in semi-hydro with a water reservoir. That is their ideal. But this one grows and props so well. Maybe I'll take some of these cuttings to the plant swap this weekend because I just have so much of this plant now. It has grown exponentially. I feel like begonias in general grow quite exponentially, especially once you've got them going right. And so it's a really great plant to like grow and share with friends. This one, okay, also it's got a bit of a new leaf coming in there. Bright red, but also like a little bit hairy, furry from those sort of spiky spots. It is just so cool. And to be honest, to be fully frank with y'all, this plant, when someone gave it to me in a trade, I was not enthused. I wasn't really a fan of it. I I still hadn't really gotten into begonias. I really didn't know what I was doing, and I tend to not be the biggest fan of red in plants, but the more I grew this one and the more I started to love the sort of blackness. It's like, it's literally going into shadow. You can't even see the color, but the more I grew to love this sort of blackness on the front of the leaves, the sort of red kind of goes in there and adds to it. I don't know, it makes them darker. I swear it makes the leaves darker because it's a contrast on the back, and so it's sucking all the color away. But yeah, now I really, really love it, and I wouldn't want to change the red backs. I feel like this sort of dark blood red back of a leaf is something I can get more into than the sort of, I feel like when I think of red plants, I think of like crotons, and that's more of a bright, poppy, orangey red. I'm less into that. I'm more into these like burgundy, deep, maroony blood reds. That makes me sound a bit creepy, but that's fine, I'll take it. This next one is actually one that I just potted up into my planted window terrarium in my last video, actually. This here is a begonia baramensis, I think it's called, and it is just a beautiful, I think it's a rhizomaceous begonia rather than a cane begonia, but it does like nice terrarium settings. I think I could probably get it to adapt to sort of normal room temperatures and humidities, but it would take time, and while it's still this young, I don't really want to do that. But this one is known for its really, really black middles of the leaves, but it's got a sort of shiny silver lining to them. It's got a silver margin, and when these grow bigger, oh my goodness, they are so freaking gorgeous. I'm so excited for mine to get bigger because I think they are so freaking cool. But for now, I'm just growing mine in my little terrarium, and hopefully it does well in here. I think it will like it. So far, it's not complained at all from being in here since the transition. It's been perfectly happy with it, so I'm not worried about it, and I genuinely like it in this so much. I think it's like, it's cool to have, it's like literally, I'm framing my plant. I'm framing my living plant, and I love it. So very, very happy with that one. We're gonna go for this big boy next. Oh my goodness, this is a two-hand job. Okay. I genuinely can't even show this properly. This here is an alocasia poly, or alocasia amazonica poly, and this is another one of my absolute oldest plants. I have had this one since the very beginning. I think this was one of my first 10 plants, and so it's like 5-something years old at this point, and it has recently, in the past sort of couple months, started growing phenomenally. I'm not exactly sure why that is, that it suddenly just started putting out even bigger, bolder, sort of shinier, blackier leaves, but it has, and I am absolutely here for it. I love this one so much. This is, I'd say, a staple in my collection. My home would not be complete without an alocasia amazonica poly at this point. And oh, it's so cool. And like, it's very different to the other alocasia because that one was more velvety, but this one is more sort of shiny, leathery in its feeling. Almost, I don't want to say latex, but it's definitely giving sort of shiny latex vibes in these beautiful shiny leaves. And also the backs of this one, sorry, this one's quite an awkward one to show. The backs of these leaves are a sort of purpley color, and the veins on them are so cool and beautiful. It is just an alocasia that I would definitely recommend to everybody. You can see how freaking gigantic this one is compared to me. And I'm not necessarily a small human. So it is just such a cool one. I've had this one in semi-hydro with a water reservoir for years and years and years. At this point, I have got countless babies from this plant, and this one gives prolific corms, literally constantly corming. I'm sure if I pulled this out to repot at any point, it's probably got 10, 15, 20 corms just in there. And so it is constantly growing. Actually, I think this plant, maybe this leaf here is from the mother plant, but then it's got like its own babies in its pot, so it is multi-generational within this pot, which is super exciting. I feel like that's something really fun about alocasias, is you can sort of get multi-generations in there because they corm, and so it's fun to grow. Also, alocasia poly was the first one that I learned to grow alocasia corms with. And so it's like, this is a sentimental plant for me. I absolutely love it, and I could not see my collection without it. And it's got like really black dark leaves, which helps as well. I think this is the last one. So the last plant that I'm going to talk about today is my begonia black forest, I believe this one is. It was actually traded with me as a Cracklin Rosie, but turns out it's not a Cracklin Rosie. Cracklin Rosies are a bit more pink in their sort of spots. This one is very, very dark black, but with beautiful kind of large silver spots on it that are kind of sparse. I feel like a lot of begonias, cane begonias especially, this is a cane begonia, a lot of cane begonias, they have the spots, but they are a lot more, they're a lot denser in the spots, whereas this one I quite like that it's a bit more sparse. And of course this has the classic blood red begonia backs of its leaves, and it is just so black. Also, the sort of shape of these leaves, it kind of gives me batwing vibes, sort of how it's going like a batwing would. And again, this one is growing phenomenally. I like to keep all of my cane begonias in semi-hydro where I can, and this one is not an exception. It loves it in here, but it is very, very thirsty, and so I need to water it probably more than I do. I think I will probably chop and prop this one as well. It's currently just a single stem in here that has branched. One of the great things about cane begonias is they branch really, really easily. Even without like you chopping them, they will branch. But if I were to chop the top off, if I were to behead it and take props from that, then this would probably grow from multiple growth points lower down and just branch out further and become a really, really bushy plant really, really quickly. So that's just another reason why I have learned to absolutely love myself a good cane begonia, and this black forest is not an exception. So there, those are, I think, all of the black, dark, gothic plants that I have in my collection. I'd be interested to hear if you had any more dark plants that you could add to this list. Put them down below in the comments. You might give me some inspiration. I'm always looking for more. But that is my list, and I really love all of these plants so much. Before I sign off though, I want to say a huge thank you to the newest member of my Good Growing fam over on Patreon, Amy Laura. Thank you so much for joining in. I really appreciate it. If anyone else is interested in joining the Patreon, it is £3 a month, and for that you get all of the things. I just have one tier and everybody gets everything, including access to my Discord server where you can talk in our little community. We have live chats where you can show me your plants and we can chat and just get to know each other. I also do bonus content over there and you can vote in polls. It's basically a grand old time, and so it's there if you would like it. But don't worry if that is not your thing, that's absolutely fine. There's no pressure to join ever. I just think it's a bit of fun. So yeah, thank you, Amy Laura, for joining in there. The rest of you, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things you'd like me to talk about in the future, and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Do not forget to keep growing. Bye!